Breaking news as MOWAA and Benin Royal Museum findings continue. So what I have here now is the issues that proceeded after the signing of the joint declaration that I did the video before, which is uploaded already. So this is a follow-up. Immediately that was signed, the matter was taken to the Bundestag. You can see here it is written the Deutsche Bundestag, which is taken to the Dutch Parliament, where they discuss issues regarding the nation. So the matter was taken there, and you can see in this place it is written Antwort der Bundesregierung, which means answers from the federal government of Germany to questions which the oppositions were asking them concerning the museum, concerning the artifact. So these are what we have here. So it's a bit very lengthy. It's a bit very lengthy. You can see it is quite very, very lengthy. So what I want to do now is this. So the first 3 pages that we have here, which is 1, 2, 3, is the observation of the pilatus, as in the people who a kind of oppose to the constructions or have concerns concerning the construction of a MOWAA. So these were the arguments that they brought to the parliament, which they were asking questions to the federal government of Germany concerning it. So I'll be reading just this one, and this one. So these 3 pages is what I'll be reading. Then from these other pages was the question that was asked the Bundesregierung. So it's quite very lengthy, so I'll not be able to read it today. So this will come later. This is very interesting. Don't miss this one, because from this one you can be able to figure out the argument. People who also claim co-ownership of Benin bronzes, so that conspire to every of the controversies that we are seeing in Edo State. So I will focus on just these 3 pages. So here right now it is written in Dutch. So what I did was to do a translation of this write-up. I did a translation in English so that I can read it to you guys. So I will go to the English. I have it here. So I have the English here. So I'm going to be reading the English translation for you guys. It's very interesting. So stay back. So like I said, it's very, very interesting. So this is the English translation. So you can see answer of the federal government to the minor interpellation by members of the parliament. So answers that, questions that was asked the federal government and answers that they gave. So I'm going to be reading this for you guys. So stay back as I read. So it started with the planned construction of the Edo Museum of West Africa out in Benin City, and the role of the historical kingdom of Benin in the slave trade. Preliminary remark by the interpillators. In the joint declaration on the return of the Benin bronzes and on the bilateral museum cooperation, which Germany and Nigeria signed on July 1st, 2022. So this was what I was talking about. It's a continuation from after they signed that joint declaration. So both sides committed themselves to support the establishment of museum facility in Benin City. According to media report, the planned construction of the Edo Museum of West Africa Art in Benin City and the role of the historical kingdom of Benin in the slave trade. Preliminary remark by the interpillators. In the joint declaration on the return of the Benin bronzes and on bilateral museum cooperation, which Germany and Nigeria signed on July 1st, 2022, both sides committed themselves to support the establishment of museum facility in Benin City. According to media report, Plans for the construction of a museum pavilion, the first phase of the planned Edo Museum of West Africa Art, MOWAA, have now been publicly presented. So it was carried, published. You can see these are linked. So these people are asking the federal government of Germany question, the oppositions. So they also have record of other media reports concerning MOWAA and the museum plan to be constructed. So I continue. Meanwhile, according to media reports, a protest movement has formed against the construction of a MOWAA, demanding the establishment of a royal museum in Benin City. So you can see the link. So they also got the information that a protest is going on against the construction of a MOWAA because they want Benin Royal Museum. You can see in this place, they were also speaking because they also were also following media report. You can see here is written www.vanguard. So they also bring their findings and they put media report attached to it. So Vanguard reported that people are protesting against the construction of a MOWAA because they are demanding the establishment of a royal museum. So they are telling the federal government of Germany in that parliament that day. The Oba of Benin has proposed building a royal museum of Benin in front of the palace, which tourists could visit year-round. Vanguard carried it also. You can see it. Vanguard carried it. Media report, quote, the director of the National Museum and Monument Commission of Nigeria in this context are saying that the federal government of Nigeria would accelerate the construction of a royal palace museum in which the Benin bronzes artifact returned from Germany will be housed. So those interpillators now are telling the federal government their findings, that they have find out that the director of National Museum and Monument have stated that the federal government of Nigeria will accelerate the construction of Royal Palace Museum in front of Oba Palace, that we ask all the artifacts that will be returned from Germany. So they are telling the federal government of Germany if they are aware of this. Apparently, there is a controversy between the government of the federal state of Edo, which intend to use MOWAA, to which the German federal government pledged a contribution of 4.5 million euros in July 2021. So the German government, the federal government of Germany, pledged to the construction of a MOWAA 4.5 million euros in July 2021. So to that effect, you will see that even their own media carried it. This is the link. So as a museum for the restitution artifact and of the Oba of Benin, which according to media report is apparently supported by the Nigeria federal government, Vanguard carried it, is seeking to secure access to the artifact from the historical kingdom of Benin that were restituted from Germany. Media reports indicate that the Nigeria federal government is actively working towards the return of the Nigeria artifacts through the Director General of the National Commission for Museum and Monument, NCMM, Professor Abba Tijani. Professor Abba Tijani was the one who, on behalf of the Nigeria federal government, received two artifacts returned to Nigeria in February 2022 by British University and handed them over to the Oba of Benin, promising that the Nigeria federal government was determined to retrieve all Nigeria artwork stored abroad. Vanguard carried it. The final statement appeared to be a fragment and is omitted. The danger that the restituted Benin bronzes from Germany Museum could ultimately fall into private hands, especially into the hands of the Oba's family, and thus be removed from public view, is therefore in this questioner view more pressing than ever. I will read that place again. He said the final sentence appear to be a fragment and is omitted. The danger that the restituted Benin bronzes from German museum could ultimately fall into private hands, especially into the hands of the Oba's family, and thus be removed from the public view, is therefore in the questioner view more pressing than ever. So which means they were having concern. The oppositions now that are asking the federal government of Germany, we are having concern that the return artifact that will be handed or returned back to Nigeria and handed into the Oba's family, they were having concern about it that is going to fall into a private individual's hand, which will deprive the public a view of it. So that was their concern, main concern. Should this happen, the questioner believe that the role of the historical kingdom of Benin in the intra-Africa and transatlantic slave trade would almost certainly go unmentioned. If this should happen, so this were their concern. So if this should happen, that they return all these artifacts and it goes to the Oba's family, so it's going to be a concern that the intra-Africa and transatlantic slave trade will almost certainly go unmentioned. So this intra-Africa and transatlantic trade, slave trade, these are other group claiming co-ownership to the Benin bronzes. You people will see it when I continue to read those questions that I said I'm going to read. So these were their concern, that other people will be affected if it is being taken back to Edo State and given to the Oba of Benin. Other people are showing concern. The questioner considered the memory of the slave trader and the role Benin played in this trade to be an essential desideratum that must be anchored in the collective memory. In this context, it should also be noted that the copper used for the Benin bronzes came from Europe. So there were other questions. So they were also having the argument that those copper that was used to create the bronzes actually came from Europe. In their parliament that day, they were having this argument. The copper that was used to create these bronzes, they were saying it came from Europe, it came from us. So according to a study by the ethnologist Johann Zimmermann, the constant import of casting material by Europe merchants enabled the prosperity and thus the gentrification of Benin Act. The merchant means of payment were manilas. So at that time, the merchant means of payment was manilas, and manilas were made of ham or ankle rings, so of metal. These things were made of metal. When they were using to do payment, to do currencies that time, were made of metals. So with which slaves were purchased from Africa slave trader. With which slaves were purchased from Africa slave trader. The bronze caster of the historical kingdom of Benin created their works of art from this metal. So you can see argument that is around the bronzes itself, let alone the construction of the museum. So they are having another argument that even the bronzes we are talking about, what is used, the copper that is used to make those bronzes came from Europe. It came from us. So why should we return some of these things? These were concerns. Benin dark role in the slave trade. So which means Benin were also having, as in we are also involved at that time in selling, as in slave trade movement. He said Benin dark role in slave trade have recently been addressed by the New York-based Restitution Study Group, ROSG. This group, ROSG, Restitution Study Group, these people are holding strong argument concerning Benin bronzes. This initiative, founded in 2000 by Deirdre Farmer Perlman, is strictly opposed to the restitution of the artifact from the historical kingdom of Benin. So these people are opposing the restitution of Benin bronzes, which is also supported and promoted by the German federal government, because, according to media reports, it is only enriching those whose ancestors in the kingdom of Benin profited from the transatlantic trade in enslaved people. Describe itself as an initiative that speaks out of on behalf of descendants of enslaved people in the United States, the Caribbean, and the United Kingdom. These descendants assert a co-ownership right to the artifact from the historical kingdom of Benin and expressly oppose their transfer to Nigeria. In their opinion, these artifacts are the wealth and legacy of the descendants of slaves, not of slave traders. So, not of slave traders, but of the descendants of slaves. So, not only the slave traders should have it, because they are accusing Benin now to be Benin City now to be part of the slave traders. So, but the descendants of the slave, they also have right concerning the artifact. We want the ROSG, which is the Restitution Study Group. We want the ROSG explicitly state our children and the world to see this treasure and learn about their origin in the slave trade. So their argument is that they want the world and their children to see these treasures and learn about their origin in the slave trade. So, which is to compare it with the first argument, which is if they should return this thing back to Benin and be given to a private individual, it will be blocked for the view of the whole public. So now their argument is that they want this artifact also to be seen by their children and the world, so that they can learn about their origin in the slave trade. The ROSG demand that European and US museum hold the bronze in trust, and that the bronzes not to be transferred to Nigeria. So this is after they have signed the joint declaration that they are going to be sending those artifacts back to Nigeria. After that signing, there were strong argument that these things don't need to be sent back to Nigeria or either to Edo State or Benin City. He said the ROSG demand that European and US museums hold the bronzes in trust. They demand that they should hold the bronzes in trust, and that the bronzes not to be transferred to Nigeria. This proposal, incidentally, was also made in essence by the philosopher Kwame A. Appiah. This proposal, incidentally, was also made in essence by the philosopher Kwame A. Appiah, a Ghanaian, also have his own view on it. And you can see there is a link that also carried it. So what did he say? Fundamental doubts about the gift of the Benin bronzes to Nigeria were also raised by the renowned British historian Robert Tubbs, who stated that the proponents of repatriation were right when they said that this is a matter of principle. But I think it is the opposite of what they claim. Why should even symbolic reparation be paid to the heirs of the slave traders? This question is apparently too disturbing for the dogmas of decolonization that many members of our current intellectual establishments have adopted as a vehicle for their own political and cultural resentment. Against this background, clarifying whether illuminating the role of the historical kingdom of Benin in the slave trader is part of the concept of MOWAA, and to what you can see where this concept of MOWAA is coming from now. It says, against the background, clarifying whether illuminating the role of the historical kingdom of Benin in the slave trade is part of the concept of MOWAA, and to what extent the German federal government actively demanded the inclusion of the role in negotiation with Nigeria is an objective of this initiative by the questioner. So what I just want to bring out of that place is talking about, after all of this argument and all, now they now have issue with the concept of that even a MOWAA, because they are saying the descendants of the slaves also have right to the artifact as well as the slave traders. So the Beninese are seen as the slave traders. The descendants, those maybe that they were also sold, they also have right somehow. So there were a lot of argument concerning it. Argument of if they should repatriate this object back is going to fall into the hand of a private individual, and that is also, they have a lot of issues with that. From what I read, lot of issues. So now the concept is a more like, let us do it, let it be worldwide, let our children, let the whole world see what we have, let it not be to one individual. These are not my words, this is what I'm reading for you guys. It said, notwithstanding all this pressing question, the German federal government has already created fact by signing the joint declaration on the return of the Benin bronzes and on a bilateral museum cooperation, thereby initiating the transfer of ownership of artifacts from the historical kingdom of Benin in the collection of German museums to Nigeria. Will there be a transfer of ownership of all artifacts from the historical kingdom of Benin in German museums? So they start to ask the question. And it appears that this will happen following the signing of the agreement. So they now say, it appears that this will happen following the signing of the agreement between the Prussian Cultural Heritage Foundation, SPK, and the Nigerian National Commission for Museums and Monuments, which stipulates the transfer of ownership of all artifacts from the historical kingdom of Benin in the SPK collections. The German side no longer has any influence whatsoever on the whereabouts of and the handling of the Benin bronzes. That is precisely the intention was underscored by the Minister of the State for Culture and Media, Claudia Roth. So Claudia Roth is from Germany. She is the Minister of State for Culture and Media, with a statement that this return has exemplified character for all museums in Germany that possess collections items from colonial context. The questioner notes that the defector's donation of these bronzes, whose value is considered inestimable, is light of German museum collection, was once tied to a condition that guaranteed the German side a minimal degree of influence regarding their future whereabouts, such as the question of making visible the victim of the slave trade, such as the question of making visible the victims of the slave trade by the historical kingdom of Benin. So I'm going to be stopping this one here. So from this other place that I'll be reading maybe later or tomorrow is where the questions were asked. You can see here it's written number 1. So for all what I read to you guys was a kind of the observation after the joint and declaration was signed of the return of the Benin bronzes to Nigeria. So the observation of a kind of oppositions to that move was what I read to you now. Their observations, how they followed media both in Germany and also in Nigeria. What was happening, the protest against the MOWAA, the plan to build the MOWAA Museum. You can see Benin Royal Museum was not mentioned. It was only mentioned when they said they are protesting because they don't want to construct, they don't want MOWAA to be constructed. They only want the Benin Royal Museum to be constructed and given to the Oba of Benin. And you can see from what I read, they were having argument that if these things are returned back to Nigeria or to Edo State and is given to a private individual, it was a strong concern for them that it will not be shown to the public. And this ROSG group, which is the Restitution Study Group, came up again, and they were holding claim of the descendant slave and the slave trader, that they want a co-ownership about these collections, a co-ownership, and let it be a kind of something that their children and the whole world will see. And they also mentioned that people from Nigeria protested against the construction of MOWAA, and the German government also contributed 4.5 million euros on July 2021 to the construction of MOWAA. And they also talk about the concept of MOWAA. The concept of MOWAA. So they also talk about the concept of MOWAA. Like here, they said, against this background, clarifying whether eliminating the role of the historical kingdom of Benin in the slave trade is the part of the concept of MOWAA, as in if it was the role that Benin played in the slave trade is the part of that concept of MOWAA. So this was the question that the interpellators were asking the federal government of Germany. So what is the concept of MOWAA? Is it that that E represents Edo? Is it that it is the role that the Beninese played in slave trade? Is it the part of the concept of MOWAA? And to what extent the German federal government actively demand the inclusion of this role in negotiating with Nigeria is an object of this initiative by the questioner. So you can see that so many questions were around this. And also, they were also having an argument that even the copper that was used to make these bronzes in Benin were also materials that was gotten from Europe. And these were materials that they were using, which is nilas, which were the currency they were using as a den to purchase slaves. So these are the materials the Benin people gathered to make these bronzes we are talking about. So they were having a lot of argument, even why the joint declaration was already signed to return all artifacts to Benin City. And you will see a spot where they say they should stop the repatriation of those bronzes to Nigeria because of this argument that was on ground. Because of this argument that was on ground. So it was not all about Edo people or Benin people wanted these bronzes, only them. There were other people that were claiming co-ownership to that. And because they are claiming co-ownership to that, they submitted that the repatriation of these artifacts should be stopped and that the German and the United States should hold these bronzes into trust. So my next video, I'm going to be reading those questions that was asked the federal government of Germany, of which they could not give answer to many of the questions. But from the question, we will see what the questioner, the information that the questioner were having in their hand, and it will help us to explain proper this particular one that I just read. These were the observations before they started asking the question. This was what they said. The observations about the protest, the observations about co-ownership, people are claiming co-ownership, the observations about people who also do not want this artifact to be repatriated to Benin City or to Nigeria. So the next video I'll be doing will go into that question, and we'll see the internal battles that was also happening in Germany, though that joint declaration was already signed. Not only battles that was happening in Edo State or in Benin City where protesters were protesting, it was also happening in the parliament of Germany, and that resulted to changes. I can tell you that it resulted to changes of name because other race were claiming co-ownership. They were saying they are descendants of the slave, while there are also the slave traders. So the Benis were kind of recognized as the slave traders, but the descendants of slave still need co-ownership of this. And the descendants of the slave are not just only Benis. They are not only Benin people. So more will come. And I believe it was because of some of these arguments that they just decided to say, let it be a kind of the West Africa stuff. It's not for me to conclude, but we'll read it. Then after that, we'll know what the issues are. Thank you.